Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You have been chosen, not by a king, not by a government, not by a committee of powerful men, but by Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. You have been given the most important assignment in human history, to guide an entire civilization back to the truth. And yet, many of those you were sent to save will reject you, mock you, threaten you, and in some cases, hunt you down and kill you. This was the reality of the prophets of Allah. Some of them were thrown into fires so enormous that birds could not fly over them. Some were cast into the bottom of wells and left for dead. Some were swallowed by creatures from the ocean's depths. Some were betrayed by their own people, their own neighbors, their own blood, and some were murdered in cold blood, not for any crime they committed, but for the single act of speaking the truth. And then there are the mysteries. One prophet died while standing on his feet, and no one in his kingdom knew he was dead. One prophet may have been raised to the heavens while he was still alive. And one prophet, according to Islamic belief, has not died at all, and will not die until he returns near the end of time to fulfill his mission. Tonight, we are going deep. We are not just listing names. We are entering the world of each prophet, their struggles, their context, the civilizations they lived in, and the circumstances surrounding their deaths. These are the 25 prophets mentioned by name in the Quran. And their stories will change how you see the world. Stay until the very end, because the story of the final prophet on this list, the most beloved human being who ever walked this earth, will move you to tears. If you're new here, subscribe right now. You will not want to miss what's coming. Let's begin. 1. Adam, the first man, and the first death. Before there was civilization, before there was language, before there was agriculture or fire, or the first sunrise witnessed by human eyes, there was Adam. He was created from clay, shaped by the hands of his Lord, and breathed into with the divine spirit. He was taught the names of all things, a gift that set him apart from the angels themselves. He walked in Jannah. He spoke with Allah directly. He held in his hands a closeness to the divine that no earthly king has ever possessed. And then came the test. The moment Adam and his wife Hawa were guided out of the garden, the real journey began. They were placed on the earth, a strange, wild, enormous world, with nothing but each other and the guidance of their Lord. And they had to build everything from scratch, not just shelter, not just food, but civilization itself, morality, repentance, the meaning of forgiveness, how to mourn, how to bury the dead. Here is something remarkable that is often overlooked. When the son of Adam killed his brother, the very first murder in human history, Adam and Hawa had no idea what to do with a dead body. They had never seen death before. It was a crow, according to historical traditions, that scratched the earth and showed them how to bury what had been lost. The man who built the foundations of human civilization on earth would eventually face his own end. Islamic traditions record that Adam lived for a profoundly long time. Reports vary, but accounts in Islamic literature suggest he lived close to 1,000 years. When his time came, it is said that the angels descended to prepare him, washing him, wrapping him in burial shrouds, teaching the human family how to honor the dead. He is believed to have died peacefully, surrounded by his descendants, having seen generations rise and fall on the earth he had been placed to inherit. The exact location of his grave is unknown. Some reports point toward a region near Mecca. Others suggest Mount Abu Qubays. Many scholars consider the location to be among the hidden knowledge of Allah. But here is what we know for certain. The first man to walk this earth was also the first human being to experience death. He opened that door for all of us. And because of his first act of repentance, the sincerest turning back to Allah recorded in Scripture, he also became a symbol of something Islam holds dear, that the door of forgiveness never closes. 2. Idris, the prophet who was raised to a high station. His name appears only twice in the Quran, yet the mystery surrounding him has fascinated scholars, philosophers, and students of Islamic history for over 14 centuries. Allah says about him, and mentioned in the book Idris, indeed, he was a man of truth and a prophet, and we raised him to a high station. A high station. The Arabic is makanan aliyon, and the question that has occupied scholars ever since is simple. What does that mean? Idris is widely identified in Islamic scholarship with the figure known in other traditions as Enoch. He is believed to have been among the earliest prophets sent after Adam, a scholar, a man of profound wisdom, credited in many classical sources with knowledge of writing, astronomy, and the sciences. Some traditions describe him as wearing sewn garments before anyone else, a civilization builder in the truest sense. But it is his end that truly sets him apart. The majority of classical scholars, including Ibn Kathir in his famous work Al-Bidayah wal-Nihaya, relay traditions that suggest Idris was raised bodily into the heavens during his lifetime. Some narrations describe the angel of death meeting him in the fourth heaven and his soul being taken there. Others simply say Allah elevated him in a way that remains beyond ordinary human understanding. Was he raised like Prophet Isa? Did he taste death before being elevated? Did he experience something entirely without precedent? The answer, ultimately, belongs to Allah alone. What we can say is this: the Quran does not say Idris died. It says he was raised to a high station. And that deliberate, precise, mysterious phrasing is not an accident. It is an invitation to reflect, to wonder, to sit with the humbling reality that there are things about the universe, even about its own history, that Allah has chosen to keep between himself and those he loves. 3. Nanoa, 950 years of patience. Let us talk about what 950 years actually means. If you started preaching a message today and continued, without stopping, through the entire span of recorded Islamic civilization, from the time of the Prophet Muhammad all the way to the present day, that would be roughly 1,100 years. Preached for 950. To put it another way, most prophets preached for decades and were blessed to see even a small group accept the truth. Preached for nearly a millennium, and his entire nation, save a handful, rejected him. Not just rejected, they mocked him. They covered their ears and their faces so they would not have to hear his words. They told their children to ignore him. They made his name a joke. And still he preached. This was not stubbornness. This was divine appointment. Every morning, Nuh woke up in a world that hated the truth and chose to speak it anyway. Then came the flood. The Quran describes it with terrifying detail. Water gushing from the earth and falling from the sky simultaneously. A catastrophe that covered everything. His own son refused to board the ark, running instead toward a mountain, believing he could outrun the judgment of Allah. Nuh watched him drown, and even in that moment of unimaginable grief, he turned to his Lord. After the waters receded, Nuh led the survivors out of the ark onto a world scrubbed clean. He continued his mission for however many years remained to him. Islamic traditions suggest he lived well over 1,000 years in total. He died naturally. He had earned rest. The exact location of his grave is disputed. Some reports mention a region in modern-day Lebanon, others in Iraq. There is even a site near Nablus in Palestine associated with his name. But the precise location remains unknown. What is not unknown is his legacy. He is one of the 5 greatest messengers, the Ulul Azm, the prophets of extraordinary resolve. He stood alone against the entire world and did not bend. And on the day of judgment, nations will come to him, asking him to intercede, and the weight of his patience will speak for itself. What if I told you that the next prophet was thrown into a fire so catastrophically large that the city's citizens used catapults to hurl him into it, because no human being could get close enough to throw him themselves? 4. Abraham. The friend of Allah, Ibrahim, was born into a family of idol makers. His own father carved the gods that the city worshipped, and from the time he was a child, something in Ibrahim refused to accept it. He looked at the stars, the moon, the sun, and recognized that anything which sets, anything which rises and falls under the command of something else, cannot be God. By pure reflection, by pure fitra, the natural human instinct for truth, Ibrahim arrived at Tawhid, monotheism, the worship of one God. This put him on a collision course with everything around him. He smashed the idols. He left the one largest idol standing, hung the axe around its neck, and when they asked who did it, he told them to ask the idol itself. When they said idols cannot speak, he turned the logic back on them. Then why do you worship something that cannot speak, cannot hear, cannot harm or benefit you? They had no answer. So they did what people without answers often do. They reached for violence. The fire they built for Ibrahim was, by many accounts in classical Islamic history, one of the largest ever constructed. The catapults were necessary because the heat prevented any human from approaching closely enough to throw him in. He was launched through the air toward the flames, and Allah commanded the fire, "Be coolness and safety for Ibrahim." He walked out. After surviving Nimrod's attempt to kill him, Ibrahim continued his extraordinary life. He migrated, settled, had children late in life through a miracle, nearly sacrificed his son Ismail in one of the greatest tests of faith ever recorded, and ultimately died peacefully in old age. He is believed to have been buried in Hebron, Al-Khalil, in present-day Palestine. The cave of Machpelah, known in Arabic as Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi, stands there today. Millions have visited it, and even today, centuries after his burial, his name is on the tongues of more than 2 billion people, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, all tracing their spiritual lineage back to one man who believed when everyone around him denied. Khalilullah, the friend of Allah, a title no one else in history has been given. 5. Lot. Witness to the most devastating punishment, Lut was the nephew of Ibrahim, and he walked alongside his uncle in faith and mission. He was sent to a people whose moral corruption had reached a level the Quran describes as unprecedented. The people of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah had normalized acts that violated the natural order of creation. And when the angels of Allah came to Lut's home in the form of handsome young men, the people of the city surrounded his house, demanding access to his guests. Lut stood at the door, alone, desperate. He said, "These are my daughters. They are purer for you." He was making an appeal, offering the permissible as an alternative. But they had gone so far beyond reason that they pushed past him. The angels revealed themselves. They told Lut to leave before dawn with his family and not to look back. His wife looked back. She became a sign And what was sent upon those cities is described in the Quran with a word that suggests stones rained down from the sky. Sijil, baked, hardened clay stones, each one marked by Allah. The destruction was total. Lut survived. He continued, settled among other people, and Islamic scholars generally agree he lived out his remaining years in peace before dying naturally. The exact location of his grave is unknown. What he witnessed, however, the obliteration of 2 entire cities as divine punishment, is something the Quran invokes repeatedly as a warning for those who would follow in their path. The ruins of those cities, many scholars believe, still exist beneath the Dead Sea. 6. Ishmael. The one who was willing Ismail was born to Ibrahim and his wife Hajar when Ibrahim was already very old. He was a miracle child, prayed for, longed for, arrived against every expectation. And then, when he was still a young boy, his father woke up one morning and told him what he had seen in a dream. "O my son, I have seen in a dream that I am sacrificing you." In the Islamic tradition, the dreams of prophets are revelation. Ibrahim was not confused. He was not unsure. He knew what was being asked of him. And his son, young, still growing into manhood, looked at his father and said, "O my father, do what you have been commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, among the patient." There is no recorded moment in the Quran of greater, quieter courage than that. Ibrahim laid his son down. He raised the knife, and Allah called out, "O Ibrahim, you have fulfilled the vision." A ram appeared in Ismail's place. The test was passed, not in the act of killing, but in the act of total submission. Ismail grew up to help his father build the Kaaba in Mecca, the first house dedicated to the worship of Allah on earth. He settled in the Hijaz and became the ancestor of the Arab peoples. He is believed to have died naturally and to have been buried near the Kaaba itself, in the area known as Hijr Ismail, the semicircular enclosure beside the Kaaba that millions of pilgrims walk past during Tawaf. To this day, that sacred ground holds his memory. 7. Isaac. The miracle of old age Isaac was born under circumstances that made his mother laugh out loud. When the angels came to Ibrahim bringing the news of a son through Sarah, his elderly wife heard from behind the tent and laughed in disbelief. She was old. Ibrahim was old. The natural time for children had long passed. But the angel said, "Are you astonished at the decree of Allah? May the mercy of Allah and his blessings be upon you, people of this house." Isaac was that mercy made flesh. He carried on the prophetic lineage after his father. Islamic traditions hold that he died in old age, peacefully, and was buried alongside his father Ibrahim in Hebron, the line of prophethood that would eventually produce Musa, Dawood, Sulaiman, Zachariah, Yahya, and Isa. All of it flows through Isaac. 8. Jacob, grief, patience, and reunion. Jacob experienced a pain that very few fathers can imagine. His beloved son Yusuf, the most beautiful of his children, the one to whom Allah had given the gift of dream interpretation, was thrown into a well by his own brothers, who then returned home with a blood-soaked shirt and a lie. They told their father that a wolf had devoured him. Jacob did not believe them. The Quran tells us he wept so deeply and for so long that his eyes turned white from sorrow. He went partially blind from grief. Years passed. The ache did not leave him. And then, in one of the most emotionally overwhelming sequences in the entire Quran, the story turned. Yusuf was alive. He was not just alive. He was the second most powerful man in Egypt. And when Jacob finally received his son's shirt, carried across the distance between them. He placed it over his face, and his sight was restored. He eventually traveled to Egypt, where he was reunited with Yusuf and lived out his final years in comfort and love. He died in Egypt, surrounded by his children, after a life defined by an almost supernatural capacity to hold grief and hope simultaneously. Islamic reports indicate his remains were later transported and buried alongside his father and grandfather in the sacred valley of Hebron. 9. Yusuf, Joseph, from the well to the throne. No story in the Quran is told in more complete detail than the story of Yusuf. Allah calls it the best of stories, and when you live inside it for even a few minutes, you understand why. He was thrown into a well by his brothers at a young age, sold into slavery in Egypt for a handful of coins, brought into the household of a nobleman, and then falsely accused of a crime he never committed by the very woman who had tried to seduce him. He was thrown into prison. In prison, he interpreted dreams, and the dream interpretations were accurate. A fellow prisoner was released and promised to mention Yusuf to the king, and promptly forgot for years. Then the king of Egypt had a dream that no one could interpret, and someone remembered the prisoner who understood dreams. Yusuf was brought before the king, interpreted the dream with precision, and was given authority over the treasury of Egypt. The same hands that had been chained were now the hands that held the grain supply of an entire civilization during 7 years of famine. And when his brothers came to Egypt desperate for food, not recognizing him, he recognized them immediately. He did not take revenge. He tested them. He revealed himself. He said, "No blame will there be upon you today. Allah will forgive you." He died peacefully in Egypt, after a life that is, quite simply, the most dramatic arc in all of prophetic history. Later traditions suggest his remains were eventually moved to the Holy Land. The next prophet lost everything: his wealth, his health, his children, his social standing. He was left with nothing but open wounds and a faith that refused to crack. His story is not just about suffering. It is about what suffering reveals about the human soul. 10. Ayub Job. The anatomy of patience. Ayub was a prophet who was blessed with everything: wealth, family, health, status, and then, through a divine test whose wisdom only Allah fully understands, he lost it all. The traditions surrounding his story describe years of severe illness, skin afflictions, pain that did not relent, isolation. His wife stayed with him, working to support them both. Friends and companions distanced themselves. He did not curse Allah. He did not demand an explanation. He held on. The Quran captures his prayer in a single, devastating line: "Adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful." That is it. That is the entire complaint. No rage, no ultimatum, just the quiet acknowledgement of his suffering and his trust in who Allah is. Allah responded. His health was restored. His wealth was returned. He was given family. He was given more than what had been taken. He died naturally after many more years of life, his patience having transformed into a legacy that Muslims reach for in their darkest moments to this day. His name itself has become synonymous with endurance in Islamic culture. When things become almost unbearable, people say, "Be like Ayub." 11. Shu'aib. The prophet of economic justice. Shu'aib was sent to the people of Madian, a prosperous trading nation who had allowed wealth to corrupt their ethics. They cheated in their measurements. They gave less than what was owed, took more than what was deserved. They had built an entire economic culture on manipulation and fraud. And Shu'aib, described in some traditions as among the most eloquent of the prophets in speech, came to warn them that economic dishonesty is not a minor sin. It is a dismantling of the social contract that holds civilization together. They mocked him. They said his prayers had made him soft. They threatened him and his followers with expulsion from the city. Allah's punishment came upon them as a roar, a catastrophic sound that ended their civilization. Shuaib survived and is believed to have died naturally. His grave's location is uncertain, though some classical sources associate a site near the Dead Sea region with his memory. His warning remains one of the most relevant prophetic messages for any era built on commerce, that wealth gained through dishonesty carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. 12. Musa, Moses, the one who spoke with Allah, no prophet in the Quran, is mentioned more times than Musa. His name appears over 130 times. His story spans more chapters, more events, more dramatic turns than any other prophet's narrative in the book. He was born during a genocide. Pharaoh, one of history's most infamous tyrants, had commanded the killing of every newborn Israelite male out of fear of a prophecy that said a child from among them would end his reign. Into this world, Musa was born. His mother, terrified, did the only thing that made no rational sense and every spiritual sense. She placed him in a basket and released him into the Nile. The baby floated to the palace of the very man who had ordered his death. Pharaoh's wife took him in. And Musa grew up inside the house of his people's oppressor. He fled after killing an Egyptian. In a moment of confrontation, he wandered to Midian. He worked as a shepherd. He married. He built a quiet life. And then, on a night journey home, he saw a fire on the mountainside. When he went to investigate, the bush burned, but was not consumed. And a voice spoke, "O Musa, I am Allah, Lord of the worlds." Everything that followed, the plagues, the confrontations with Pharaoh, the parting of the sea, the 40 years in the wilderness, the receiving of the Torah, is one of the most extraordinary sequences of divinely guided human history ever recorded. When Musa's time came, he was near the Holy Land, which Allah had told him he would not enter. The Prophet Muhammad, on his night journey, passed by a grave near the red sand dune and saw a man praying inside his grave. It was Musa. The exact location of his grave is not known with certainty, though this reference places it somewhere near the vicinity of modern-day Palestine or the Sinai. That mystery was preserved deliberately, as the Prophet said it would be. He died as he had lived, close to Allah. Closer, perhaps, than any human being, except the one who would come after him. 13. Harun, Aaron, the brother who stayed when Musa asked Allah for a companion in his mission, someone to stand beside him when he faced Pharaoh. Allah gave him his brother Harun. Harun was eloquent where Musa was intense. He was gentle where Musa was forceful. Together, they formed one of the most moving partnerships in prophetic history. Two brothers, walking into the most powerful court in the ancient world and demanding the freedom of an enslaved people. When Musa went up the mountain to receive the Torah, he left Harun in charge of the Israelites. And while he was gone, some among them fell into the worship of the golden calf. Harun tried to stop them and was threatened. When Musa returned, he seized his brother's beard in anger. Harun explained what had happened. Musa understood. Harun died before his brother. Islamic traditions indicate he passed away during the 40-year period of wandering in the wilderness, before the Israelites reached the Holy Land. He was buried on the journey. A site near the ancient city of Petra in modern-day Jordan, Jabal Harun, the mountain of Aaron, is traditionally associated with his burial place. A white dome marks that site to this day. 14. Dul-Kifli. The prophet of the pledge, his name, means the one of the pledge or the one of the double portion. Very little is preserved about him with certainty in Islamic scholarship. Many classical scholars, including Ibn Kathir, suggest he may be identified with the prophet Ezekiel of the biblical tradition, or possibly with Elisha or another figure. Others believe he was a distinct prophet sent to a particular people in a particular time, whose records have simply not been preserved in detail. What the Quran tells us is that he was among the patient and the righteous, that he maintained his pledge to Allah without wavering. He is believed to have died naturally, having fulfilled his covenant. The details remain largely hidden from history, a reminder that not every servant of Allah who mattered most to the world made it into the records that survived. The next prophet left his people without permission. He gave up when Allah had not yet given him permission to give up, and the consequence was something that no human being should ever have to experience: swallowed alive by a creature from the depths of the sea. 15. Yonah. Darkness upon darkness. Yunus was sent to the people of Nineveh, a great city in what is today northern Iraq, near modern Mosul. He preached, he warned, and when the people showed no signs of repenting, Yunus made a decision that Allah had not authorized. He left. He departed before receiving divine permission to abandon his mission. He boarded a ship. A violent storm overtook it. The crew, in the custom of those desperate times, cast lots to determine who would be thrown overboard to lighten the load and appease whatever force was threatening them. The lot fell on Yunus. He was thrown into the sea. A whale swallowed him. Alive. Imagine that for a moment. Darkness, inside darkness, inside darkness. The darkness of night, the darkness of the ocean's depths, the darkness of the whale's belly. And in that absolute suffocating darkness, Yunus called out, "There is no deity except you. Exalted are you. Indeed, I have been of the wrongdoers." No bargaining, no conditions, just truth. Pure, clear acknowledgement of who Allah is and who Yunus was in that moment. And Allah responded. The whale brought him to shore. He emerged weak, vulnerable, described in the Quran as being without cover, his skin exposed, needing the shade of a gourd plant to recover. He was stripped of every comfort and every pride. And then Allah sent him back. This time, his people believed. 100,000 or more, the Quran says. An entire civilization turned back to truth, the only nation in the Quran, besides the people of Musa in Egypt, whose mass repentance is accepted before the punishment arrives. Yunus recovered, continued his mission, and is believed to have died naturally after fulfilling it. The site of Nabi Yunus, Prophet Jonah's mosque and shrine, stood for centuries near Mosul in Iraq, built over what was believed to be his burial place, until it was destroyed in 2014. The loss of that site is mourned to this day. 16. David, the warrior king who wept. David was given something almost no human being in history has received. He was simultaneously a king, a prophet, and a musician, whose voice the Quran describes as so powerful that the mountains and the birds joined him in his glorification of Allah. He started as a young man, a shepherd, a soldier who volunteered to fight the giant Jalut. He defeated Jalut with a sling and a stone, and from that moment, his ascent was remarkable. He was given the Zabur, the Psalms, a book of worship and divine poetry. He established a just kingdom. He crafted iron into armor with his own hands, Allah having softened the iron for him as a miracle. And every morning and every evening, The Quran tells us the mountains and the birds echoed his praises. He died peacefully. A life of worship, war, justice, and music, not as opposites, but as one unified devotion to Allah. His son Sulayman would inherit both his kingdom and his prophethood. 17. Sulayman Solomon, the death that no one noticed. If there is one death in the Quran that stops you in your tracks, it is this one. Sulayman was the greatest king in human history by any measure of divine gift. Allah gave him command over the wind, which carried his armies across distances in ways that would have taken weeks. He was given command over the jinn, beings of smokeless fire, who built for him extraordinary structures, temples, statues, pools, and things the Quran calls like basins as large as reservoirs. He could speak the language of birds and animals. A tiny ant once warned its colony of his approaching army, and he heard her and smiled. He ruled a kingdom so vast and so advanced that there is nothing in ancient human history that quite compares to it. And then, surrounded by all of this power, all of this authority, all of these jinn and spirits and armies working under his command, Sulayman died in the most quietly human way imaginable. He was leaning on his staff, and he simply stopped. His soul left his body while he stood there, supported by his walking stick. And the jinn, who believed themselves to have knowledge of the unseen, kept working. They kept building. They kept believing that the king was watching. For how long? The Quran does not say. It says only that time passed, and eventually a creature of the earth, a tiny worm, ate through the base of the staff. And Sulayman's body fell. When he fell, it became clear to the jinn that if they had known the unseen, they would not have remained in humiliating punishment. Think about what Allah is saying here. The beings who prided themselves on secret knowledge, on power, on seeing beyond the ordinary, they were fooled by a dead man with a stick. The most powerful kingdom on earth ground to a halt, not because of war or revolution or natural disaster, but because no one noticed that the king had already left. Death does not announce itself. It does not wait for a convenient moment. It arrives when it is time, and the world keeps moving, often completely unaware. 18. Ilyas, Elijah. Standing alone against a nation, Ilyas was sent to the people of Baalbek, a powerful, prosperous city in the region of what is today Lebanon and Syria. His people worshipped an idol called Baal, and Ilyas stood against it. To stand against a people's god is to stand against their identity, their culture, their ancestors, their pride. Ilyas did it anyway. He preached and warned and was rejected with particular hostility. The Quran grants him a legacy of peace, salam, upon Ilyas. Most Islamic sources indicate he died naturally, but some traditions are more mysterious, hinting that he may have been elevated in a manner similar to Idris, his body removed from ordinary death. These reports are not definitive. What is certain is that he stood against the tide, alone, and that his name is preserved in the Quran as one worth honoring. 19. Al-Yasir, Elisha. The quiet successor Al-Yasir is mentioned briefly in the Quran among the righteous. Islamic tradition identifies him as the successor and spiritual heir of Ilyas. Where Ilyas was confrontational and urgent, Al-Yasir carried on the work with a different character, patient, steady, committed. He continued the mission among the people who had so recently rejected his predecessor. He is believed to have died naturally after a life of faithful service. His grave is associated in some traditions with a location in the Levant region. His story reminds us that not every great person needs to be dramatic. Some of the most important work in human history has been done quietly by people who simply showed up and continued what needed to be continued. 20. Zechariah. The martyr in the tree Zechariah was an elderly man, a priest in the sacred precincts of Jerusalem who had spent his entire life serving Allah without ever having a child. His wife was barren. He was old. And still, in his old age, he looked at his young ward Miriam and noticed something astonishing. She had provisions, fresh fruit, that were not in season, not available, with no natural explanation for their presence. He asked her where they came from. She said, "It is from Allah. Indeed, Allah provides for whom He wills without account." And something stirred in Zechariah. If Allah can provide for Miriam from the unseen, then perhaps, even now, even at this age, He could provide a child. He prayed, "My Lord, grant me from yourself a good offspring. Indeed, you are the hearer of supplication." A voice called out to him while he was praying inside the sanctuary, "Allah gives you good tidings of Yahya." He was shocked. He asked for a sign. He was told he would not speak to anyone for 3 days, not as a punishment, but as a divine confirmation, a moment set apart from ordinary life. Yahya was born, and Zechariah grew old in the joy of a father who received what he had long given up expecting. His death, however, was not peaceful. Islamic historical reports, widely circulated though not explicitly detailed in the Quran itself, describe Zechariah being pursued by enemies at the end of his life. Seeking refuge, he hid inside the hollow of a tree, and the tree was cut in half, with Zechariah inside it. He is remembered as a martyr, a man who spent his life in quiet, faithful service and was repaid not with safety, but with a death that confirmed what his whole life had declared, that the truth is worth any price. 21. Yahya. John the Baptist. The truth that cost everything Yahya was extraordinary from before his birth. The Quran says he was given wisdom as a child. He was described as noble, chaste, a prophet, righteous. He was, according to Islamic understanding, one of the rare few who never committed a sin. And he was given a name, Yahya, that no one before him had been given. He grew up with a fierceness about truth that made him beloved to the sincere and dangerous to the corrupt. Islamic tradition holds that a powerful ruler of the time desired to marry a woman who was forbidden to him under Allah's law. Yahya spoke out against it, refused to validate what was wrong, refused to keep silent to preserve his own safety. A woman, in some accounts the ruler's desired bride or her daughter, demanded Yahya's death as the price of her dancing. The ruler, trapped by his own public oath, complied. Yahya was beheaded. He was a young man when he died. He had lived a life of complete purity, no doubt, no compromise, no corruption, and it ended with a blade, because he refused to say that wrong was right. His head, according to many historical reports, was brought on a platter. The Prophet Muhammad said that Yahya and Isa were cousins. They were the same generation, born within months of each other, both tasked with preparing the world for a truth that was coming. Yahya prepared the path, and then the path took his life. But what about Prophet Isa? Did the man who raised the dead and healed the blind then die himself on a cross, as his enemies intended? Islam has a completely different answer, and it will reframe everything you think you know about how his story ends. 22. Isa, Jesus. The prophet who has not yet died. The Islamic position on the death of Isa and Maryam is one of the most significant theological distinctions between Islam and Christianity, and the Quran states it with remarkable directness. And they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. but it was made to appear so to them. Rather, Allah raised him to himself, and Allah is ever exalted in might and wise. Isa was born without a father, a miracle. He spoke from the cradle as an infant, a miracle. He healed the blind and the leprous. He brought the dead back to life by the permission of Allah. He breathed life into clay birds. He was given the Injil, the Gospel, as divine revelation. His entire existence was miraculous, and his exit from this world was no different. When his enemies closed in on him and believed they had captured him and crucified him, the truth of what happened was known only to Allah. Islamic belief holds that Isa was raised, bodily, spiritually, to the heavens. He is alive in the heavens right now, and his story on earth is not finished. Near the end of time, before the day of judgment, Isa will descend. He will return to the earth. He will break the cross, the symbol used to falsely represent his death. He will establish justice. He will defeat the Dajjal, the false Messiah. And then, after completing what was left unfinished, he will live out the remainder of his natural life and die. And he will be buried, and he will be resurrected on the day of judgment like everyone else. This is not a death we can document today, because it has not happened yet. Isa ibn Maryam is the only prophet on this list whose story is still unfolding, and that alone should give every one of us pause. We live in the time between his first mission and his second. Whatever is coming has not yet come. 23. Hud, the voice against the wind. The people of Ad were extraordinary. They were giants in stature by many traditional accounts, physically dominant, architecturally gifted, builders of towers and monuments that represented to them their own invincibility. They asked, with the arrogance of the powerful, "Who is greater than us in strength?" And Hud came to them with an answer they did not want to hear. Allah, who created you, is greater. He warned them. He pleaded with them. He offered them the clarity of Tawhid against the fog of their pride. And they laughed. They mocked him. They told him their gods would drive him mad. The punishment that came for the people of Ad is described in the Quran as a relentless wind, not a normal storm, but a cosmic correction. It lasted 7 nights and 8 days. It hollowed out every person it touched, leaving them like the collapsed trunks of uprooted palm trees. Hud was protected. He and those who believed with him were spared. He survived his people's destruction and continued living among believers. Most scholars hold that he died naturally, sometime after the calamity that ended his nation. Some traditions place his grave in the Hadramaut region of Yemen, where there is a site known as Kaaba Hud, the grave of Hud, still visited today. 24. Salih, the she-camel. And the 3 days the people of Thamud carved their homes directly into the sides of mountains. If you visit Madian Salih in northern Saudi Arabia today, and you can, you will see them, enormous stone faces rising from the desert, ancient doorways cut directly into rock, the ghost of a civilization that was wealthy and sophisticated and completely without excuse. Salih came to them with the clearest possible proof: a she-camel sent by Allah directly as a sign. It was no ordinary animal. It was a divine test, made visible. And the instruction was simple: let her graze freely, let her drink from the water source, and do not harm her. If they did harm her, they were told, punishment would come. For a time, they held back. And then, 3 days before the deadline, they killed her. Salih told them, enjoy yourselves in your homes for 3 days. Then the punishment will befall you. On the morning of the 4th day, A single thunderous cry split the air, and the people of Thamud were silenced forever. Salih survived. He and the believers departed. He died naturally, probably in the Hijaz or southern Levant region. The ruins of Thamud, the carved mountain cities, still stand in the Saudi desert. They are a monument to what happens when divine signs are received and then deliberately, consciously destroyed. 25. Muhammad, the final messenger. And we arrive at the one who is the most beloved human being who ever walked this earth. Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 Ser, an orphan. His father died before he was born. His mother died when he was 6. He was raised by his grandfather and then his uncle. He grew up among the poor of his society and yet earned the title Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, before a single revelation had arrived. At the age of 40, in the cave of Hira on the mountain of light outside Mecca, he was gripped by the divine presence for the first time. The word Iqra, read, shook through him, and the Quran began to descend. What followed was 23 years of the most extraordinary prophetic mission in human history. Persecution in Mecca, exile, the slow, grinding building of a community in Medina, wars against armies 10 times their size, diplomatic missions, the liberation of Mecca without bloodshed, and finally, the farewell pilgrimage in 632 C, where he stood before 100,000 companions and delivered what was, in effect, his goodbye. He told them, "I may not meet you after this year." He instructed them on their rights, their duties to each other, the sanctity of life and property. And then he asked, "Have I delivered the message?" And they said yes. And he looked to the sky and said, "O Allah, bear witness." Shortly after his return to Medina, he became ill. A severe headache, a fever. He moved between the rooms of his wives, weakening with each passing day. He continued leading prayers as long as he could, and when he could no longer stand, he directed Abu Bakr to lead in his place. On the morning of the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, a Monday, he lifted the curtain of Aisha's room and looked out at the people praying. He smiled. They saw his face and their hearts filled with joy. Thinking he was recovering, he let the curtain fall. He returned to Aisha's lap. He dipped his hand in a bowl of water and wiped his face, saying softly, "There is no God but Allah. Indeed, death has its agonies." His last words, whispered as he looked upward, "Rather the highest companionship. Rather the highest companionship. Rather the highest companionship." He was 63 years old. He was buried in the exact room where he died, Aisha's room, beneath a green dome that today stands at the center of one of the most visited places on earth. And every single day, billions of Muslims around the world say, "Allahumma salli ala Muhammad," O Allah, send blessings upon Muhammad. His name has not left human lips for a single second in 1400 years. Subhanallah. Take a moment with what you have just heard. Some of these prophets were thrown into fires. Some were swallowed by creatures of the deep. Some were sawed apart inside trees. Some were beheaded. Some were struck by winds so devastating that nothing survived. And some simply leaned on a staff and left this world so quietly that the most powerful beings ever created didn't notice until it was too late. One has not died at all. And yet, every single one of them was sent with the same message. Not a complicated message, not a political message, not a message that required advanced education or philosophical training. Just this: worship Allah alone. Be just, be honest, be patient, fear Allah and love His creation. The diversity of their deaths is staggering. The unity of their mission is absolute. And perhaps the most humbling thing of all is this: every one of them at some point stood completely alone, against their people, against their kings, against their families, against the world, and they did not move, not because they were fearless, but because they knew what they were standing for was worth standing for. That is the real lesson. Not how they died, how they lived. If this video has increased your knowledge and love for the prophets of Allah, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so we can continue this journey together. And leave a comment below. Which prophet's story moved you the most, and why? Until next time, take care of your faith. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.